Good morning. I was telling Brett back there that, as a director of an organization, we always have the same mission each year, and it changes. But this year, we have a focus. It's three-pronged. It's reach men, reach the church, and reach vulnerable communities, learn from them, and then teach them how to be aware of human trafficking and all the elements. And today I get to check two of those boxes at once, and I'm very grateful for that. But I'm also grateful for being in a room full of men because, before I jump into the slides, I'll tell you, I volunteered while I was, working in oil and gas. I volunteered and did a van tour with Elijah Rising, who's an organization that's been around a long time. Got some awareness, a bit of a fire started to burn there, and I was thanked regularly by people after these van tours, like, yeah, no problem. This is what we're called to do. I said, no, you don't understand. Thank you, because there are no men doing this. There are no men talking about this. And it took a while for that to sink in, because I'm not a particularly smart guy. And I realized that that's a calling. And whether we leave today and we all volunteer to fight human trafficking, or we just take a message with us and we realize that we can impact our own lives, which will impact our greater circle and our community and our church, then there is power in gathering as men. So I am grateful to see this many men. And anytime I get to speak to men, I feel like I'm in a brotherhood because we are facing a lot of the same challenges. And we're going to talk about a lot of those today. So let's get started. As we jump into these slides, I was inspired by the verse in Ezekiel, standing in the gap. We're all pretty familiar with it. Or at least have heard it. And so we're going to unpack that today. And as we do that, I hope that we can bring some parallels in not only what I do on a daily basis, but what we all face on a daily basis as men. And by unpack that, I mean I've got 317 slides and you're all going to be late for work. It's not that bad. I'll keep it moving. I promise. All right, so living in truth and love with others is sort of the subtitle, but honestly, it's right at the heart of what we're called to do. Our first slide is that verse I was talking about. I'm going to throw my glasses on here, and I'll get my own little prompter here as I continue. I searched for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand in the gap before me to defend the land so that I would not destroy it, but I found no one. I'm behind this podium. I'm raised up. It's strange. I feel like I'm doing a sermon. I'm certainly not qualified for that. But I am qualified to hear Scripture and go with what God calls me to learn from it. And I'm hopeful that as we go through this, and I make sure I'm working the clicker right. There we go. A little bit of a delay. There, I'll get it. That we can do that in an orderly way that maybe reaches us in such a way that we can continue this conversation even after today. So we're 4 sections, really. Holding the breach, assessing the damage. Section 3 is repairing the damage, and then preserving the wall. You see, in ancient times, the wall was the greatest form of defense. You got to protect something, build a wall. They get over, build a bigger wall, build a deeper wall. And so as we look at that, and I hear this verse, and it stays with me, I'm reminded of a few things. And one is that walls can be a wonderful, terrible thing. Sometimes we put up walls and we are the prisoner inside, right? And other times, it's a conscious way to protect something that we care about. As we're looking at the verse one more time, there's a word in this verse, and we'll go through each of these as we go through them. As we look at these sections, there's a word in this verse that is right key with what we're talking about today. As we look at the sections, I want to tell you what it is about and what it's not about, because we can very easily slip into sort of this shame dialogue when we talk about difficult subjects. Living in truth and love with others. When you're outside of the church, that sounds sort of flowery and sweet. Oh, look at them. They're going to talk about truth and love. Isn't that nice? But when you're in the church, you know that is a vulnerable place to be. Because when we talk about truth and love with others, we are sometimes confirmed and sometimes we're convicted. And so as we talk about that, I want to talk about what it is and what it isn't. It is about identifying and defending against threats, section 1, but it's not about escaping and hiding. Section 2 is about an honest evaluation, but it's not about lying to ourselves. Section 3 is about making foundational, resilient repairs. but not superficial repairs, just the outside. And then section 4 is being on watch and leading with love. And so as we look at this, the word defend is something in this verse that really jumps out at me, because that's a word that is near to our heart at Demand Disruption. We actually call our volunteers defenders. People who go through our training, we call them defenders, because we define that as batteries. Come on. If you are late for work, I'm going to blame it on this, not me. To live in truth and love with others. That's actually how we've defined defend this whole time. And so for that to be the title of today is very appropriate. So, section 1, let's get into it. Holding the breach. Holding the breach, whenever walls were damaged, people had to go to that vulnerable spot while others rebuilt it. And so as we look at this as men, what threats are actually imposed upon us? What are things we have to risk on a daily basis? So true or false? In our culture, you must give your consent before you are exposed to pornography or something like that, lust, whatever. Is that true or false? It really is false. I mean, it doesn't say we should get the opportunity to. It says you must, and we just don't get that opportunity. This is a billboard that is approximately 54 stories, 53 stories, and it's not just in the busiest part of this neighborhood, the busiest city or state or even nation. It's one of the busiest streets in the world, Times Square. And this billboard was put up, and I can only imagine, like I took my kids to New York City, we had a great time, but I can only imagine if that was up and my son said, "Daddy, what's that?" Well, now I've got a choice to make. I didn't get to choose whether or not we're going to have the talk about pornography, about temptation, about the people that are harmed and how it harms us as we view it. Or I could say, that's nothing, son. Let's go to the M&M store, right? Avoid it. We in our culture don't get that choice all the time. But it's not just pornography. It's much more than that. Movies, TV, radio, all this media, the ways that we're reached as consumers is a very important point to keep in mind, that it comes in many forms. So I'm talking about threats, and I've got a clock and a laptop and a philodendron. I don't know what that's a philodendron, honestly. I don't know anything about plants. But what is the threat in this screen? Well, in a world that is constantly inundating us, time, opportunity, a means, all of that is represented here. I've got a laptop, I've got internet access. That's a means to watch whatever I want or reach whatever I want. Time, my wife just left for the store or lunch with her friends. Temptation sets in. So threats, we must redefine some things if we're going to stay fortified and know what those threats are. And as we look at this, we have to realize that there really isn't any difference between church-going men and not church-going men in terms of surveys. The Barna Group did a survey about 5 years ago now, and 68% of church-going men and approximately 50% of pastors admitted to regularly viewing pornography. And I don't point that out to poke the finger in the eye of the church. No, we have to realize that Satan sees that cross on the building, and he sees crosshairs, like we are the target, you are the trophy to put on his mantle, and you are going to be tempted regularly. We have to, 2 by 2, shoulder to shoulder, work together as men in our culture. And so when we accept that the men of the church are both the damaged and the defenders, when we realize that, we can really take down that shame barrier. And that is crucial. When we talk with men who are struggling, when we talk with men who are buying sex, when we talk with men who are just have a pornography addiction, whatever that is, the first thing we do is we lead in empathy and vulnerability. Shame has to be eliminated. And we have the opportunity to do that together as men. And when we realize that, we have to be reminded of the good news. The Lord says in Ezekiel, the same book, I will seek the lost, and I will bring back the strayed, and I will bind up the injured, and I will strengthen the weak, and the fat and strong I will destroy. I will feed them in justice. It didn't say, you go do all this. It says, I will do that. So a willing heart, especially when we're convicted, is a beautiful thing, because we know that we have that promise. When we do the work, he will do all the rest. All right, so we know there are threats. Let's assess the damage in our wall. Like, what are we talking about here, Joe? Well, when we look at the damage, this is about an honest evaluation and not lying to ourselves, which sometimes we do. Let me ask y'all, which vase in these pictures is broken? Both. Yeah, that's right. Now, there's a crack on that one, and sometimes we turn our, I don't say vase, I'm not fancy enough for that, our vase around so they don't see the cracks. We do that as men every day, right? That's just what we do. We're not going to talk about that. I'm a man. I'm not gonna go there. No, we don't talk about that. We're guys. The one on the right, there is no hiding it. It's shattered in 100 pieces. But that one on the left there, it might hold water, it might not, but it's broken. And so when we understand that, we realize that if I'm talking to a man who has been arrested for solicitation of prostitution, and I'm right across from him, and I've never been in that position, I can still talk to him about what temptation feels like. I can still talk to him about what being tempted and struggling with pornography, which I did for 7, 8 years, whatever that time was, and most of that time didn't know I was struggling, didn't realize that till toward the end of it. I can still empathize with this man, and that's really what these vases represent. Another way of looking at it is treads. Okay, well, I'm leaving some tracks, or the middle one, I'm on some slippery ground, and sometimes I lose a little control. And then finally, the last one, I'm entrenched, and I'm going to need some help, and I'm probably going to incur some damage getting out of this. We meet each other. Some of us are in these different places, and so how we serve one another can really come through in a number of ways. But what's not fair about our culture is that we're not told certain temptations, pornography, for example, come with consequences. Okay, I clicked on that to consume something, but instead, I didn't realize I'm the one being consumed. There are over 40 negative consequences to viewing pornography. Did y'all know that? Over 40. I didn't realize that. Now, we have warning labels on alcohol and cigarettes. We even have them on energy drinks. A kid can buy an energy drink, and on the side it will say, warning. Why? Because what they're about to take in is going to change them on a physical, chemical level. And so they must give their consent. You don't see that with pornography. And studies are showing that pornography is as addictive as heroin in many ways, and it accesses the same part of the brain. Except you get to combine that type of addiction with isolation that nobody knows about. No outward signs, these struggles, these consequences, whether physical, psychological, spiritual, or social. And there are some very serious ones. I can tell you this, we work with men who are arrested and prosecuted, and we have a class. And in that class, we hand this out. And every one of those men, we say, just check them off. Don't even put your name on this paper. This is for you. This is a self-evaluation. Check this off. And every one we get back, guys, 10, 12, 30, there's check marks in every category. It's starting this realization that, man, okay, there are consequences I didn't even realize were associated with that. And so we invite people to do their own inventory because that's the beginning of really assessing that damage. And so we talked about culture before. Another exercise we do with those guys, these buyers, they're in this class along with their partners, people that we ask them to bring with them because they're not going to go through this anonymously. They're going to have to bring somebody in their life that cares about them and they care about. And so they're in this class, and we say, what does it mean to be a man in our culture? And so we kind of talk about these 5 things, and then we go through this exercise. Now, this exercise came from really my frustration. I was talking to a group of guys in this class. I wasn't really getting anything back, and I was like, all right, that's it, guys. And I've never met a dry erase board I didn't like. Like I will, if there's one in this room, this presentation would be on that dry erase board. So as I'm looking in the back of the room, I just go back there, I draw this T, I grab the marker aggressively as I could, and I said, guys, what is it to be a man in our culture? You tell me. And so I just kind of shut up and let them tell me. And some of the things that we heard, that's not going to dissolve. Okay, that's fine. On that right side, we didn't have time to do it because I was going to do it with you guys. But on that right side, culture's telling you from movies, TV, radio, whatever that is. I listen to talk radio on the way here, sports radio, Astros, right? So I'm listening, and I heard probably 3 references to pornography or what it is to be a man in a sexual way, because that's their audience, and that's what men want. So that's what we'll talk about. And so as we look at those influences, we would ask these guys in these classes, tell us what culture says it is to be a man. They say things like never wrong, alpha male, sex, sex and then more sex. We had men that would talk about having a side piece, or everything was really about this identification with what culture says it is to be a man. And then I said, okay, now you're home, the doorbell rings, and from the deep recesses of her makeup case, your daughter says, Dad, that's my date. Can you get the door? I said, now tell me what you want on the other side of that door. And most guys would say nothing. I said, that's not an option. Somebody's on the other side of that door. Describe them to me. Honorable, respectful, protector, provider, believer, compassionate. That's everything that's on this right side. And I look at these men and I'm like, can you tell me when you consciously decided that the left side is what you were going to be? Because you would require all this for somebody that you love. You got to be on that list of who you love. And so this right side that's ideal, there was this huge contrast. And I mention that because when we're assessing the damage, we've got to really stop and think, what truths have I accepted? Am I judging other people that are struggling instead of equipping myself to be the person that they struggle along with? And then a little less and a little less. And so as we do that as men, we start to really address one of the biggest problems, and that is our false idols. We have false idols. When you work, there's a measure of pride in that. That's a good thing. When it's your identity, that's not a good thing. But sometimes we can hide in our work. Sex, pornography, politics. We're not going to talk about politics today, ever. We're not ever going to talk about it. We're in church already talking about sex. We ain't adding politics to that cocktail. No way. Money, individuality. So these are our idols that we sometimes don't even realize that we're kneeling down to on a daily basis. And a big part of that is our identity. We have an identity crisis. Our kids do, because you were never meant to know what every friend you have thinks of you online. And you were never meant to have this ubiquitous flow of influence, temptation, and everything else. And so our identities are struggling. And when we lose our identity and we lose our purpose, we still leave a legacy. You don't get to choose that. You will leave a legacy. I promise you that. But when we remember our identity in Jesus Christ, remember our purpose of who we are as men, when we turn to a man and admit our sins and struggles, and we can go shoulder to shoulder with somebody in accountability, that legacy looks very different. And that's all I care about. That's all I care about what I do. Stopping trafficking, yes. Stopping trafficking is an end result of men taking accountability, changing their identity, and changing their legacies. And if we can do that, on any scale, we honor God and we leave a legacy that is enduring. Because we're going to leave that legacy one way or another. And getting to the truth is not easy. It takes time. You don't always get it right away. But we do have to get to it. In disclosure statements, there are packs where I say, okay, this is a covenant. I've got a guy I meet with once a week. What we talk about, that's who it ends up with right there, because we've got to have those safe spaces. I know that not everybody knows everybody in this room, but everybody got up and came here at 6 a.m. to hear some guy talk. And so you do have a common purpose. You have a church that had the courage to talk about this today. You have such fertile ground here. And if you don't know a guy and you want to know a guy, you email Brett or email somebody here, and man, that fellowship, you start to take that up a notch. I'm growing in faith with two friends of mine, guys that are in our house church, our small group, and I'm investing in them and they're investing in me, and it's awesome. It is awesome. Like, I've got friends that I love. They're just not there. We're not going to get in that investment space. But both of those guys are really starting to grow in faith, and it gives me courage to know that I absolutely am going to have somebody that I can do life with. So this is some summary stuff we can send out later for that section. All right, repairing the damage. We defend the breach, we assess the damage, now repairing the damage. It is about empathy, honesty, and accountability. Like, these are difficult things to talk about sometimes. It's not about a superficial repair. And remember what I said earlier. We are both the damage and the defender. So you may hear all of this very differently. You may hear, yeah, that makes sense. I want to be part of that. I want to help somebody in this room, or I want to volunteer with Demand Disruption, and I want to work with them. You may also hear, I do need help. I'm struggling. And so I put that question mark because I've talked a lot about pornography. And again, other parts of culture that really get to us. But the reason I asked that question is, as you look at this slide, it's a busy slide. In fact, one of the versions, most of my presentations, it'll come up one at a time. So sorry for overwhelming you. But let's start on the left side. Internal struggle. Internal struggle are the things that everybody feels. We all do. We've all felt it at some point or another. There's a few examples there. But that internal struggle, human nature says, I don't want to feel that. I need an exit. I am not going to be stuck in this. And our exit is we cut straight across to that right side. Everybody jump to that right side visually for me, and the acting out behaviors. You see the ones listed there? Have you ever indulged in any of those acting out behaviors? Would you add some to the list? The answer is yes, if we're being honest. And the problem with that is we get some relief from that thing we didn't want to feel, and we act out, but that's temporary. And then that temporary goes away, and all of a sudden we're in this shame cycle. The shame cycle is something that's very, very real. And while we have that temporary escape with one of these acting out behaviors, we find ourselves right back there. We find ourselves shame, regret, those things start to build back up. Guess which box those go back in, which circle those go back in? Internal struggle. And then you act out. You see the cycle? We do it in small ways. We do it in life-altering ways. And when we do that, it becomes rote. And we default to that action. We default to eating. We default to, oh, I'm just going to work, or arguing, or porn, whatever that thing is. But that thing is not the problem. It's the left side that's the problem. The things that men don't talk about. Astros today, whenever they're blowing out the Braves, I'm not going to look at my friend who's going to be there in the fifth inning and turn and go, this is a great game, huh? By the way, man, I really feel insecure about some things, and I'm struggling, and I'm using pornography and brisket, not at the same time, but separately, to act out. I'm eating, and we don't do that. Nobody does that, but men especially don't do that. That is what I'm talking about. How do we get on that level with somebody where we can have that interrupt? Because the middle is the pattern interrupt. 3 things. Our beliefs, our attitudes, and our values. Those are what matter. Those are the truth. And those are the thing that should be right after the thing on the left that, hey, nobody loves me. Or, I don't have any friends. Not true. Actually, you're in a room full of them right now. It's up to you. Maybe make them a few more friends, people you don't know. But somebody will answer that call. Or, I'm worthless. Well, we know that's not true. We can count one person on that list, and that's Jesus Christ. So we know these things are not true, but we let ourselves act out accordingly. So deal in truth with one another. You know, with counterfeit bills, there are, I think the number is like 3,000 versions of them. And so the U.S. Treasury does not plaster a wall with them and tell their Treasury agents memorize all of the flaws in every one of them. They don't do that. No, they actually make them study one bill, know this bill back and forward, literally. And when you see a fake, you'll know what's missing or what's been added that shouldn't be there. That's the same with our faith. That's the same with our identity. That's the same with the things we struggle with. Know the truth and let the truth be the light against the other garbage. And we can do that in our lives. And that will bring that truth front and center. All right, we're moving right along. We're actually coming close to the end of it. And this is a slide that we also show the guys that are struggling that we work with, but also I need to always slow down enough to take account for myself, because guilt and shame are not the same things. The reason that's important is to remember is the difference. You can remember it like this. Guilt is what we did. Shame is what we tell ourselves we are. That's a dangerous place to go, but we all do that, or we very possibly could do that with the right circumstances. And here's what I mean. Like, look at the first one. I did this bad thing. I am this bad thing. When I'm talking to a man whose life is crashing down around him because he's in handcuffs and he's just been arrested for solicitation. By the way, I just described yesterday, 2.9 miles from here. I shouldn't be that specific, but I'll just point the other direction that it's not. 2.9 miles from here, there's an illicit massage business. It got shut down, and we're working with the police on a reversal. There are men being arrested. We had 8 arrests yesterday, a slow day, honestly. And I sat across from men. Some were not as remorseful as others, but I'm thinking of a man named Jose, and he was in that right category. And it was all I could do in that conversation to pull him out of that in our conversation. Guys, this stuff happens on a small scale and on a serious scale. But if I don't get to reach that person, or at least plant some seeds to where they can get out of the shame and get to the guilt, take ownership and accountability as they absolutely should for these decisions, they're never going to see the hope and the possibility of realizing, yeah, I did this thing, but it doesn't define me, and I can choose what I do next. That guy Jose went from completely broken and wrecked to, at the end, we prayed together. We don't pray for it with every guy, but we do ask him, hey, for some guys, faith is an important part of their life. And these guys are in handcuffs for trying to buy sex. So they're hiding right then from God, right? They feel this conflict. And they'll say, I don't feel much like a Christian right now. I was like, you're no less a Christian than when you walked in or whenever you started on this path. Now, are you honoring that? Maybe not, but that doesn't disqualify you. And so as we're talking, I said, it's up to you, totally up to you. But if you want to pray together, we can pray together. And as I'm praying, he is saying his own prayer out loud as we're talking. And I say all that because that never happens if you're stuck in shame. If you are in guilt and you accept accountability, that's the difference between conviction and condemnation. Amen? You feel convicted, then you see it and you know it. You feel condemned, it's over. It's done. Your sentence is eternal. And we know that's not true. Because even in his anger with Israel, God offers the hope of reconciliation, changing hard hearts to soft ones. I love this verse so much. And I will give you a new heart and a new spirit. I will put it within you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. That's the Lazarus moment, man. That's coming back to life. Because you can live a long time with a stone heart, or at least you look like you are. And if you're struggling with that, or you love people that struggle like that, or you want to be equipped to do that, that's what today is about. Living in truth and love with others. All right, so if we're going to talk about the trouble and destruction, then we got to talk about how we get over that. We developed something called the bridge. The beginning is faith and truth. We don't take one step on this bridge until we are doing the work for faith and truth. And faith is different for different people. But there's something bigger than themselves that we have to identify with. And then truth, there has to be absolute truth. Not just the thing you got caught doing, not just the thing that people know you're struggling with, but the things that have chains linked to you that you need to break so that you can be free. And so we work on that with guys. We pair them up with a defender. And they go across this bridge of support, of information, true information, because culture is not telling you the truth. That's not good for business. So don't expect to hear it from culture. Counseling and coaching, we plug them into professional help, and then accountability. See, our defenders are not therapists. We don't expect them to be. And we certainly don't expect anyone to have to own the responsibility of somebody else making progress. That's not your role. It's not your job. Don't put that on yourself. We have professionals. We have support groups. We put people in touch with information resources. So all of this is available because it's all about getting back to that truth. What interrupts the pattern? How do we do that together? How do we reach freedom and restoration? You know, part of the work that we do is really about fixing the wall, but it is about protecting it. You know, once we've got it repaired, once we're recentered, once we're back in our where we want to be, how do we continue that? And then how do we model that so that our boys and girls or people in our life and our circle see that and we can influence them and we leave that legacy? Well, as we look at it, there is a lot to healing. And this is what I was saying a second ago. I'll just paraphrase, or I'll just read the bottom line. No one expects you to be the deliverer of that freedom. If you're saying yes to working with others, whether it's in this group or outside of that, if you're saying yes to getting help, you have to make that decision first. Somebody else has to make that decision first. They can't make it for you. But when you do, it can be a very powerful, beautiful thing. And so as we look at this, we realize that the Lord brings that victory. We do the work and he does the rest. That's a saying I've been telling my kids forever. Do the work and the Lord will do the rest. And you have to think of it in those terms because you don't get to do all the rest. There were a lot of I's in that I will deliver and I will bring. There wasn't a lot of you will. So this is a quote from a guy that I was working with. Hope is good, hope is nice, but what you're showing me is something different. I'm not alone in this. He wanted to be porn free. He was actually recovering from a very difficult relationship, and he was kind of self-medicating in some certain ways. And he said, being porn-free is something I've earned and now I want to protect. His wall, he's building it back up, and he wants to defend that. We have something to defend when we think of it in those terms. And so, protecting that wall. Equipped defenders, there's a number of ways that we need to protect that wall. And whether you do it with us, because quite honestly, we need help with all four of these. We're going into a part of trafficking, fighting trafficking, that nobody else does the way we do it. And I wish I could stop saying that. I really do. But we're going to continue to do it until we have people who do it the way we do it, or work with us, or we learn from them and we change. So we need men to guide men who are struggling. We need women to guide women. We need women to guide women whose partner is struggling, a betrayed partner. You know, yesterday, those 8 arrests, 7 of them were Christians. We asked and they answered. I'm evangelical. I'm Episcopalian. I'm a Christian, or I'm a Catholic. The reason I say that is not like the newspaper shock and awe. We arrested a pastor. We arrested a police officer. No, I say that because these are people who, when they are ready to get to work and get help, they're going to see success in Jesus' name. I believe that. But they're not the only ones who need to recover. There's a betrayed partner in each of these situations, if they're married, which 6 of the 8 guys were married. That woman dealing with a phone call that her husband's in jail, and then the why takes on immediate betrayal, and when the shock wears off, there is a lot of trauma there. And so we need women that will say yes to follow a method that we've developed, the bridge method, and work with those women so they can have that healing. And then parents to guide parents who have children who are struggling with these issues. You know, we live in everybody, like I'm 48, I know what a generation gap is, I know what a technology gap is, but there's never been one in the history of mankind like we're dealing with now. So if you made some mistakes as a dad, forgive yourself, right? I mean, my parents, I was adopted 10, my aunt and uncle adopted 2 eating machines, me and my brother, I don't know what they were thinking. I really don't know what they're thinking. Their daughters just graduated from Rice. They were out, man. They were free. And like, oh, you two are a mess. We are. All right, we better take care of them. So we come on, and they did an excellent job, almost, I'd say, perfect. But if I took the way that they parented me and I applied that to my kids, I would be doing my kids a disservice. They didn't have to combat this. There's 2.5 billion pages of pornography on that phone. And there's 2 parents. Sometimes there's 1 parent. We have to realize that we have to recognize the technology gap right now and the misinformation gap and address it in a way that we've never addressed it before because we're facing a challenge we've never faced before. So we need that, and we equip people to do that. Another thing that we need, and I'm just going to be very honest, we need funding. And this is not a drive for funding today, so I won't be blocking the door waiting for you to scratch the check. I say that because imagine a nation realizing that trafficking is actually a problem, and then a nation realizing that it's a problem in the U.S. That's about where we are. We haven't gotten to, not only is it a problem in the U.S., but it's a problem in my town, in my kid's school. And in fact, I know people who are struggling and are somewhere on that timeline that's going to result in them trying to buy sex, or a woman who's been exploited. They haven't gotten there. And they haven't gotten to the core of it, which is demand. In any market, supply and demand dominates. And if there's no buyers, no one's getting sold. And that's what we're working on. But we are working on that. And everybody wants a villain. We're all human beings, right? an atrocity like trafficking, somebody's got to be responsible. It's the buyer's good. I'm glad y'all are doing something with them. They don't truly understand that our work with buyers is the most direct way to fight trafficking. And funding is a problem because of that, because we're working with the villains. And they also don't truly understand that these villains are actually brothers, husbands, people who are struggling. So those are all things that we need, that we really focus on doing the most with. All right, so back to that bridge. The reason I came back to it was we have something called the Church Body Project, and we partner with churches, and MDPC is one of those. Y'all, MDPC is on fire. If you haven't noticed, they're willing to talk about it in service. About a month ago, we were honored to get to be here with other nonprofits. They're talking about it in men's groups. We have a meeting on Thursday on how we can address this in different areas. We work with children's ministries to help them bring age-appropriate conversations about decisions and that sort of thing. So I am so honored that MDPC, we've done work with it in the past, but now we're really stirring things up. And the Church Body Project is sort of the blueprint. And one of the parts of that is to defend hearts. So we have a workshop that's about 3 hours long. You're like, dude, this was 3 hours long. The workshop is applying the things we're talking about. It's equipping ourselves. I've never done it for just a men's group. And so I lay that challenge out there for y'all. That would be awesome to grab a Saturday or do it in some other form where we are doing this. And that will equip men to work with men who are struggling. And in doing that, we teach you how to tell your story. That looks like a mess because, again, usually it pops up in different sections. But quite honestly, the top of it is, he said perfectly the first time, empathy, vulnerability, and motivation. Those are the things we work on to tell our story. And that creates our story, which breaks shame, challenges the status quo, and really brings it back to the truth. And when we do that, that's when relationships flourish. That's when people come out of this hiding and isolation and that shame cycle. And so that's one of the things we do. And we do it a number of different ways. I won't model that right now because of time. But as we do that, we start to see things change. And so we've got this acronym called TREES. Trust, build that trust, realize where that person you're with is at, have that empathy for them, use edifying language, and shame-free. There is no place in shame and healing. And that this is true for parents too. So, as we wrap it up, I was talking with Brett about discussion questions, and these are the ones that I came up with. I know that y'all oftentimes will use those to talk. If you decide to use these, I want you to know that I think that these are questions that kind of cover everything we just talked about, but also cover what it is to come to a realization and accountability and have that sort of partnership with somebody else. That's uncharted waters for some. For others, they've been doing it for years, or they're mentoring someone, or they do have that accountability partner. I hope that as y'all reflect on those, you consider the power of what it is to partner with another man in this struggle. 2 by 2, right? That is transformational. Seems like a small thing, but it is powerful. And it can be life-changing. So some today realize that they want to talk with somebody about what they're struggling with. This is our email address, defender@demanddisruption.org. That will go directly to our Defender coordinator, Mauricio. That will stay with him. And you will begin a conversation about, okay, here's some ways that could look. And then some may feel like, hey, I want to help somebody. You can still send that to Defender at Demand Disruption because Mauricio is our Defender coordinator. He works with our volunteers. But there's also our website and a page that we created for MDPC. So when you go to this website, our website /MDPC, you'll land on a co-branded page from Memorial Drive Presbyterian Church. And you'll see these options on how you can get involved or learn more. Click on that, kind of self-identify how you want to get involved, and then we'll circle back with you and we'll talk about what that looks like. So our call to action is exactly that. Which of those is something that's important and that you need in your life right now? But bigger than that, as we wrap up and as we finish up, I want to invite each and every one of you, if you're not at a place yet in a relationship with somebody here where you could have this conversation in confidence, we are here. I don't just say that. We have messages from men. We have had a message from a 14-year-old a couple weeks ago, and said, I'm struggling with porn. And so we're gonna in an age-appropriate way engage, and then we're going to get help for that kid. That help exists for everybody, but the greatest help is our realization we're struggling and the love of Jesus Christ. And I thank each and every one of you men for saying yes this morning. Thank y'all for your time.